seems, these days we can't escape fake news. We all know that our social media feeds are full of news articles and stories that are biased, exaggerated, or just plain fabricated. So how come so many of us continue to consume and share content without questioning its credibility? These stories may start on Facebook or Twitter, but once we share them, they eventually work their way into articles in the mainstream media. And these articles are then shared again on social media. And so the endless cycle continues. Is there a way that this flood of fake news can be stopped? Or can we all become better at identifying and simply ignoring it? In recent years, these questions have become an important field of research.
My name is John Rosenbeek. I'm a PhD candidate at Cambridge University, and I mainly study fake news and disinformation. Fake news is a difficult term because everyone is using it, and it's used in a lot of different contexts and by a lot of different people with a lot of different agendas and ideas and political convictions and so on. And it doesn't mean the same thing when two different people say it. So that is why I myself prefer the term disinformation, which is much more clear. Misinformation is information that is false, and that includes simple human error. If I make a mistake and I say something that is incorrect and I publish it somewhere online, that is what I would call misinformation. Disinformation includes the intent to deceive, so I must actually want to give you wrong information for it to be disinformation.
So are there things that can be done to stop the flow of disinformation? John believes that there are 4 possible solutions.
The first is legislation, so trying to write laws that regulate the flow of information in such a way that fake news becomes less prevalent. The downside of this is, of course, that you run into issues of freedom of the press very quickly.
Freedom of the press is the principle that government shouldn't interfere with or censor the media.
The second one is algorithmic fixes.
All social media sites use algorithms to choose the information they present to their users. This is the programming code that decides what content to show you based on what you like and share.
So, for example, on Facebook, you will see certain posts before other posts, and Facebook can decide which posts you see first. So in that way, you can have Facebook tweak the algorithm in such a way that fake news becomes less visible. The downside, of course, is that Facebook then decides what it wants you to see, which is not great. The third category is fact-checking, meaning correcting false stories, which is a good initiative, and for sure that is something that needs to be done. The problem is that you're always going to be behind, simply because it is much harder to fact-check something than it is to create and spread a lie. And the fourth category is education, or what you would call media literacy, which focuses on the individual level, meaning making people more resilient against deception, against manipulation, against disinformation. The upside is that this has a potential of being very effective, and you don't run into issues of freedom of the press. The downside is that it's very expensive and that it's difficult to implement in many countries.
If it is so difficult to stop the flow of disinformation and fake news, is there a way we can protect ourselves from becoming infected with it? John believes that inoculation theory could offer a potential solution.
The idea behind inoculation theory is that information can work in the same way as a virus or a bacterium. So, assuming that misleading information can be akin to some kind of infection, how do you make sure that people don't become ill? And normally in medicine that happens through a vaccine. So a vaccine is a weakened version of a certain virus or a certain bacterium that is introduced into the body, and it doesn't have the power to kill you or hurt you or make you ill, but it does make sure that the body creates antibodies against that virus, so that the next time that the virus actually enters your body, the real version of it, you already have the antibodies and you don't become ill. And inoculation theory says information can work the same way. So you can develop resistance against misleading arguments by preemptively, before the manipulation attempt occurs, thinking about the ways in which you might be deceived.
And what's a simple way to vaccinate people? Get them to play a fun game. A game where they have to create disinformation. In the game, players are shown a short text or an image, like an article headline. They can react to these in a variety of ways. The player's score is measured by followers and credibility. The aim of the game is to gather as many followers as possible without losing credibility. But the important thing is that if a player acts like a producer of disinformation, they will gain followers and credibility. But if they lie too obviously, they will lose credibility. And if they act like a good journalist reporting just the facts, they will lose followers. So the player has to learn to use all the tricks of effective producers of disinformation to succeed in the game.
So it's this active component is very important. So it's not just that someone tells you, this is how you might be deceived, this is what fake news looks like. Instead, you create it yourself. You think about it yourself, how you can use these strategies to, forward your own interests in the game, which is a much more resilient approach to training how to recognize these things than just me telling you something.
John's hope is that by the end of the game, the player will have received a small dose of the fake news disease, and they will be starting to build up antibodies. So the next time they are online, they will recognize the disinformation strategies being used on them and think before they share. So why not play the game and vaccinate yourself today?